In today's episode of Today in World War II, January 30th, the first confirmed U-boat kill by an aircraft took place on today's date. The British completed their withdrawal into Singapore proper. That's not going to end well. The Japanese win a naval battle of Rennell Island off of Guadalcanal, which was unusual as the war kept going longer and longer, due to inept American leadership in the form of their General Lucas. An entire Ranger battalion was destroyed at Anzio. In better news for the U.S. Army, um, conducted a raid in the Philippines and was able to rescue 500 POWs from the Japanese. A Soviet sub, excuse me, sinks a German passenger ship and kills up to 10,000 civilians. And Albert Speer tells Hitler the war is now lost. Where's he been for the last 3 years? Let's get to work. Okay, so on today's date, January 30th, in this case 1940, the very first confirmed kill of a German U-boat by an aircraft took place on this date. A the German, excuse me, there was a British destroyer, a British sloop, a French destroyer, and a Sutherland, which is like an amphibious aircraft, kind of like our Catalina aircraft with the U.S. They coordinated an attack against a German submarine U-55, and the Sutherland swooped in, dropped the death charges, and was the cause of the sinking of the U-boat. It was the very first time that had happened so far in the war. Considering this was January 30th, 1940, the war had only been going on since September 1st of 1939. That was pretty good performance, but it was nothing like what was going to happen later. Once we got to 1943 and the Allies had been able to close the gap where there was no air coverage in the central Atlantic, central North Atlantic, as they got more air escort carriers out there. Um, this became much more common, especially in, spoiler alert, this is going to happen a little bit later. And I'll introduce this to you in a future episode. When they were able to start producing and using homing torpedoes, it was game over for the aircraft were just killing subs at that time. But right now, when it was still in the baby stages of the Battle of the Atlantic, this was a good foreshadowing of things to come. Let's put it that way. Um, I'm not going to use any foreshadowing here. I'm just going to come out and say it. You need to subscribe to my channel. I'm serious. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it, okay? But if you do so, I won't give you a prize, but you'll have a good feeling in your heart knowing you did the right thing. Just click subscribe, click the bell. You get notified whenever I drop a new video, okay? Thank you. On January 30th, 1942, British troops evacuated the last part of Malay that they held, and they crossed the barrier or the river, the water barrier into Singapore proper. And this was the beginning, the official first day of the start of the siege of Singapore. And for the British, it was the unthinkable. The unthinkable had happened. They, in no way, shape, or form, did they think that an army could land north of Singapore and drive down overland through jungle and to be able to force them to withdraw into Singapore. They did not have any defenses from the land, which again, you think to yourself, wow, did nobody think outside the box, on that one? All these heavy caliber naval cannon that were protecting the port itself, none of them had been stationed to cover the backside, if you put it that way. So, wow, brilliant offensive on the Japanese part. Kind of ineptitude on the British side. But hey, listen, I'm not casting stones here. Okay, Americans made enough stupid decisions on their own in the war. And I'm pretty vocal when the Americans did stupid stuff. So I call out stupid stuff. Okay, let's just that's my thing here. Okay, and it would be stupid. I'm going to call you out right now. You're stupid if you don't click on the thumbs up and like this video and leave a comment. Okay. And you can even write, "Hey Don, I'm sorry for being stupid." That's enough. That's all I care about because the algorithm loves comments, loves likes, and it'll show my content to more people, which is ultimately what I want. And I just want you to help me out a little bit, okay? Thanks, man. Fist bump. All right, January 30th, 1943. The Battle of Rennel Island happened. This was a naval battle. This was around around Guadalcanal. At this point in time, the battle was long over. Right now, it was just about the Japanese evacuating whatever troops they had left. They were pretty much just scarecrows. They were barely alive. But you know what? The Japanese, to their credit, they went all out to rescue their troops. They didn't always do that. This is kind of a rare exception. I think it was because the Emperor Hirohito he had ordered that to happen, so they couldn't disobey a direct order from the Emperor. So there was a naval task force there. Now the Americans still had not cottoned on to the fact that this was an evacuation, not a reinforcement. So they had a task force there. They had the cruisers, they had some destroyers, and the Japanese sent torpedo bombers against them. And the Japanese were still pretty good at this time. They hadn't lost all their experienced, skilled pilots yet. Give them a few more months, it'll go down drastically, the quality of their attacks. But right now they were still pretty good, and they were able to attack and sink the United States cruiser Chicago, and they also sunk a destroyer and about three PT boats. So and most importantly for the Japanese, they were able to evacuate the rest of their soldiers from Guadalcanal. But at least for the American side, we took losses, but at least the Battle of Guadalcanal was officially over on January 30th, 1944, after sitting on their butts for way too long in Anzio with all these troops, guns, tanks, supplies ready to go. They waited until Kesselring had been able to move troops to cover the invasion. The first few days, the road was wide open, but no, we decided to be timid and wait. And so when we did decide to attack, the Germans were dug in and waiting, and they were given the order to attack. They came into the teeth of the German defenses. None of the two pincer attacks were able to work. They didn't capture any of their objectives. And what's worse is that an entire U.S. Army Ranger battalion was destroyed. Because that's really what you want to do. You want to take these troops, give them elite training, make them the spear of your attack, to do commando type attacks and different tasks. You want to send your most highly trained troops, skilled troops, and you want to throw them away on an attack against a fortified enemy. Sure, made a lot of sense. Every day that Major General John, or I don't know if he's a Major General, but John Lucas was general of that campaign, was a day wasted and more people died. And on speaking of rescues and not people dying, the Army did something good this time. On January 30th, 1945, in the Philippines, there was a raid conducted by Army Rangers. Their goal was to liberate Allied POWs that have been suffering in the Philippines since 1942. So almost 3 years of suffering. They were, the undescribable horror that they went through under the Japanese occupation. They were able to do a lightning raid. This was in Luzon. I'm not sure if I can pronounce this correctly, the Cabanatuan camp in Luzon. And they were able to rescue about 500 Allied prisoners of war. Good for them. Who knows how many would have died if they hadn't done that. So bully for them. On January 30th, 1945, the same date, we've been talking about the Kriegsmarine, the German Navy evacuating their armies and the civilians from East Prussia that were cut off by the Soviet pincers. And I said that they were doing I mean, look, I'm not on the German side, but I can um, praised them for an operation that was pretty well done. They did get about 2 million troops out, and they got a lot of civilians out. Unfortunately, as I talked about in previous videos, Soviet submarines were lurking and did a lot of damage. In this case, uh, uh, Soviet submarine S-13 sunk a German passenger ship called the Wilhelm Gustloff. And no one knows for sure how many people died because they weren't all of them weren't registered on the boat. But it's estimated that anywhere between five, seven, maybe 10,000 civilians died. It was the greatest loss of life in maritime history. So what can you say? It was just more people died because of the incompetence of their leadership. And just did it remind you that Hitler was a corporal in World War One? Yeah, okay. And finally, on January 30th, 1945, Albert Speer, who was in charge of keeping all the weapons productions going, despite all the heavy bombing that was going on. He met with Hitler in Berlin, and he said that, look, since the Soviets had captured the Silesia region of Poland, there was no more coal, there was no more steel. He had to tell Hitler that the war was lost. And I'm just wondering, um, that's kind of like telling a pregnant woman on at the beginning of her ninth month of gestation that you're going to have a baby. I think the woman knew way before that. Forgive me if that's somewhat of an uncouth example, but just kind of the absurdity just popped in my own mind because anybody who knew anything could have told Hitler when he didn't take Moscow in 41 that the war was over. It was just a matter of time. Well, now this was the chickens coming home to roost, but he still didn't think it was. Or maybe if he did, I don't know, he did or not. But of course, Hitler was like, well, even if we lose, it's the German people were not worthy of my leadership. So yeah, good person, good leadership there. Way to not combine forces and stop this guy. When you had the chance. But anyway, what can I say? That stays video. I appreciate